Is violence the answer? I admit my headline seems sensational and hyperbolic, but I mean the question quite seriously, not because I'm a violent person, and not because I believe humanity is inherently violent by nature, but I ask it because everywhere I look, I see those with power using violence against those who have no power. So is it the answer? I see cities funding and authorizing sweeps of homeless camps and passing laws making it illegal to sleep or even sit in public areas. I see cops killing unarmed citizens, mainly black and brown ones, and rarely are those cops held accountable for taking an innocent life, pretty much never. Even if they are punished, they are never held to the same standard as regular citizens. Look at our government. It is bathed in the bloods of innocents. And yet, the representatives of this government fill the social media landscape with appeals to our civility while they spend their days managing and appropriate money to fund systemic violence across the globe. This fundamental contradiction about violence in our society is not the only one. Everyone makes a great show of wagging their finger at the use of naughty words, while deftly turning a blind eye upon evil deeds. That's a beautiful quote, Bree. Good for you. That's a beautiful quote. Everyone makes a great show of wagging their finger at the use of naughty words, while deftly turning a blind eye upon evil deeds. We love to tone police everybody, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't be mindful with your words. Of course you should. But we really love to tone police everybody. We really love to point out we need civility in our politics. We need civility in our politics. Donald Trump said, shithole, I'm going to have a camera moment because I want to run for president in 2020. You need to be nice to... No, that's... We have an economy of war. We have an economy based on war. That's a bigger issue than civility in our politics. I don't care if Democrats and Republicans are civil to each other or not, quite frankly. I really don't care at this point. Because I don't respect our process. I have no respect for it. That's why I wouldn't... You should run for... No, I never will. Because you have to have at least some reverence for the process. I have zero. I've never had any, and I never will. Ever. But I believe we can do better. And I hope all of you do too. Otherwise, that's a pretty depressing state of mind to be in. But, yeah, I love that quote from Bree. She put it, I don't know why I expanded on it, because she put it so eloquently, and now I'm just like, yeah, I don't care. We're all like, talk nice. Meanwhile, we're killing people, and that's some bullshit. And they're like, yeah, we know, Ron. She summed it up in a very nice quote, and then you just had to babble on and on about it. I'm sorry. I apologize. Like, we get it, Ron. Yeah, we get it. Why don't you go back to the article? All right, you're right. I agree. Let's go back. But that's a beautiful quote, is my point. I should have just left it there. Everyone says that preying upon other people is bad, but everything in our society incentivizes us to do just that, prey upon each other. That's so true, too. They make it out like we're supposed to be, and we are supposed to participate in a community. And they tell us that in words. Meanwhile, everything is just dog eat dog. I mean, in corporate America, they encourage you to screw over your colleague. That's encouraged. That's rewarded. Everyone says that lying is wrong, but it is the liars who get ahead, the truth tellers who are demonized and ridiculed. The contradiction is then amplified by the mainstream media, I would call it the corporate media, who paradoxically is guided by the beauty of our weapons, to quote good old Brian Williams, the missile porn enthusiast. It's almost laughable when you hear media pundits say we don't condone violence. It's never the answer. The corporate media has never seen a war they don't like because they're funded by war profiteers. The corporate media are funded by war profiteers. The corporate media are funded by war. I'm going to repeat it because it's worth repeating. And it's worth, every day that should be a headline somewhere. The corporate media is funded by war profiteers. What kind of democratic society can exist when you have a media funded by war profiteers? A non-existent one. That's what. And I was having the conversation. I'm not here to say the BBC's perfect. It's not. The CBC's not perfect either. None of them are. But when you have a media funded by bomb makers and oil companies, your media structure is beyond broken. It is not only not helpful to the idea of a democratic society, it is toxic to it. It is the opposite. Our media structure shouldn't exist anywhere except for a fascist state. Our media structure should not be legal. So, I'm going to go to the chat. Bree wrote a beautiful article. I retweeted it. Please do read the whole thing. We're going to talk about it. But the question I want to pose to you guys, do you think humans are inherently violent? Are humans violent by nature? Is violence the answer? So I'll answer first because I posed the question, which of course is a very simple question. I don't think we're inherently violent. I think if we were, we never would have came out from the trees. And I of course mean that metaphorically, not necessarily literally. I don't know if they, but you get the idea. We decided to cooperate a long, long time ago. If we were inherently violent, that never would have happened. We just would have killed each other, and the only humans existing would be like the largest among us, presumably. But we decided to cooperate. So no, I don't think we're inherently violent. And is violence the answer? No. No, it's not, because we're not an inherently violent species. Because cooperation and community has given us so many better things. It's given us agriculture. It's given us opportunity. It's given us, and I'm talking very much, basic here. I mean, of course, exploitation happens. But we're still not an inherently violent species just because we cooperated as a species. If we didn't, if we were inherently violent, we just would have kept killing and eating each other. Which there was some of that, yeah. There was some cannibalism. But we wouldn't be here now if we were an inherently violent species. We wouldn't have cooperated if we were an inherently violent species. And I know you can interpret, someone could use that same sequence of events to interpret it differently, but again, inherently violent means you're just naturally prone to violence. It's going to be your natural response. But we've evolved from that, which means we started cooperating. Had we not started cooperating, we wouldn't have evolved from that. We would still just be instinctual creatures, just killing and taking, and that'd be it. So let me see what you guys are saying. Hobo Rody says, violence will not deliver justice. Kim Hightower says, chimps are very violent, but when cooperation works best to the benefit of more, we use that. So I guess you could say that maybe we are inherently violent. We just, and I'm not saying that I feel this way, but one could say, if they want to disagree with me, they could say that violence, we are inherently violent, we just see the greater incentive in cooperating. And I don't think that theory's right and I'm wrong. It's just, John Doe points out violence begets violence. Darlene says, we're inherently violent. Look at our closest relatives, the chimps. They're quite violent within their groups. They are quite violent within their groups. But we're not the chimps. We're the second step in evolution from that, or, whichever step. And we cooperated in a way that they don't, which makes me say we're not inherently violent. The threat of violence makes peaceful revolution possible, says Stephen Carl. If anything, capitalism is inherently violent, says Kevin. I agree with that. I do think capitalism is inherently violent. Humans are actually inherently cooperative. I agree with Chris Wynn. Humans are actually inherently cooperative. It's how civilization formed. Anyone who says humans are naturally violent are selfish and misinformed. Well, I don't know about that. I think that it depends on how you look at it. Pearl Center says violence can be used for good. I think it depends on how you define violence, which is something way too deep for us to get into right now at this point in the show. But yeah, I think it depends on what you mean by violence too, because violent is, yeah. I had to write a paper once where we had to really define what exactly violence was. And I was the only person in my class, this was in a PhD level course, I was the only person in my class to say that violence is never the answer, but I based upon it my definition. But the way they were looking at violence, I thought was so overly simplistic, and it was one of those things where the professor made her stance known to everybody. So everybody knew where the professor was at. And, if you spend any time in academia and the humanities, you realize that in many cases it's just say what you need to say to get the good grade, say what you need to say to get tenure, don't rustle the boat, don't ask questions. One of the many reasons I left it, and I know we've talked about doing longer academia segments, and I am open to that, and we should do it. But yeah, I was the only person that said violence is never the answer based on my definition of violence. And the way they were looking at it, like, well, if you say violence was never the answer, that means that if someone's attacking you, you would let them kill you. To me, that is such an elementary definition and such an elementary way to look at that question that I couldn't believe I was hearing it in a place of higher learning. It sounded like something that belonged in a right-wing think tank. But I would say that there's a difference in most cases between self-defense and violence. There's a big difference between someone's trying to kill you and you have to defend yourself to live. I don't think that's violence. I think those are two different things. And anyway, I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole. Stress is a trigger to violence. USA capitalism manufactures stress on the public, K-Line Report says. I agree. People need to reread The Lord of the Flies. That's a great book. I agree. And it's been well over a decade for me, so I should reread it. Good recommendation, actually. This is a fun question. We're going to explore this question more. Bree, thank you for writing such a great article. And everybody, thank you so much for your participation. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and make it our own. Get your